not an incredibly religious person, but there is something magical about music that I just can't put my finger on. You know, I suppose it's like faith. I mean, I suppose it's like that. I don't really, you know, the only thing I can ever say is magical enough to be considered godlike would be music. That's the spiritual connection that I have, I think. And I think most musicians feel that. I'm not alone, I'm sure. That's what keeps us coming back, and that's what keeps us hooked, I guess.
Yeah, we literally met at Mrs. Smith's preschool.
For pale young boys.
And on 2nd Avenue in Warren, PA. And I do sort of have this apocryphal memory probably of him trying to drown me in the little background, above ground swimming pools they have. But that is our first introduction.
Without any further delay, let me introduce to you Reese Campbell, James Riley from Warren, Pennsylvania, the New Dillons.
You might say you knew he was there when he started to play, and then you knew it was Reese Campbell. You didn't have to look, you know, who was at the keyboard. And he's quite a guy, but total different personalities. Jim was the one that's up there rocking away, you know, with his guitar, and Reese is sitting at the keyboard, you know, with all this fabulous stuff coming out. We went to a jazz band competition, and another friend of Jimmy's, a fella named Danny Schaefer, was sort of our equipment manager, and he was in the concert band too, but he was our equipment manager, and he was one of these kind of guys that would tear things apart and an amp apart when you're going on stage in 30 seconds, that sort of thing. And Jim would be back there changing guitar strings, and Reese would be messing around on the keyboard, and 30 seconds until showtime, and let's see, come on guys, we only have 30 seconds. Chuck, don't worry. That's another story, the name Chuck. Chuck, don't worry, it'll be okay. And it always was, you know. Drive me crazy, you know.
I was 17 back in 1986 when the first EP came out. And my sister, Tammy, is real good friends with Kathy, Jim's wife. And so we had a copy of the EP, of course, and she played it and said, "What do you think? This is a local band." And I thought it was the coolest thing ever because they were from Warren, you know. And the music was interesting. A cool thing about people in Warren, usually there's a lot of hometown pride. I think it's a beautiful town. I think we're set in a nice environment, you know, being right in the center of the Allegheny National Forest with the rivers running through here.
Does it look different to you, Reese?
The drums are a little different. So I think I kind of set up here, and I had my little keyboard here, and we had our Fostex 4-track cassette recorder that we did all of our little demos on. And Jim would sit over there
pretty much probably in that chair. But at that time, he must have had, I don't know, 20 or 25 of his guitars just lined up against that wall. They were all numbered, and he had like dozens with like Danny Schaefer like held this because he was like kind of his guitar roadie, and he had them all numbered and organized, and Jim would just like pull out all these fantastic guitars that were just lined up all against that wall. And here I am playing my little cheesy, Wurlitzer piano or whatever I had back then. I remember that was the 86. I mean, that was right at one of the first pictures we took, right? I don't remember.
How about this one?
Yeah, that was our last thing. This is like our first incarnation. This is our last. Yeah.
I saw REM in Buffalo and gave Mike Mills and Peter Buck and Michael Stipe a copy as they were getting off the bus to play Shays Buffalo. And not long after that, either by Natalie and Michael being friends, then that article came out, or that thing came out. And but then we kind of went our separate ways. I got married and restarted the band with John. John left the Maniacs, kind of for us and for that band. It was kind of like whatever. And then they exploded right after that, so it was kind of like a bad move for John. But and then we got back together again in '91. So
this week's in-studio guests, the New Dylans.
I am here with the New Dylans.
With me are members of the New Dylans.
Those happy Dylans.
If you're a folk rock group that goes by the name of the New Dylans, James Riley and Reese Campbell formed the group in the mid-'80s as they struggled through their post-college years in the sleepy town of Warren, Pennsylvania. After releasing an EP in 1986 that received critical acclaim, the band faltered for 5 years before landing a contract with Red House Records in Minneapolis in 1993. The New Dylans aren't easy to define. They play an eclectic blend of hard rock, American folk, Cajun, and Celtic music that couples the jangly pop sensibilities of the Byrds with the lyrical bite of Elvis Costello. Their two Red House albums, War and Peace, and their latest, The American Way, have put the New Dylans back on the pop music map.
I hear creative genius, I think, is a good way to put it in everything that they've done. I would say any band director or music director that got one student like them in their career was fortunate. I had two and many more beyond that, but those two were right at the top of the list.
Like those first couple of records they did for Red House, I think, the New Dylans sound is timeless. Much like Paul Simon, Bob Dylan, all of those guys that they kind of follow in that genre, the whole folk rock kind of thing.
But for a connection here or a connection there, that first New Dylans project could have just absolutely blown up. It just wasn't able to find its way through that maze of how music gets to people. Maybe we can figure it out this time around. But yeah, again, for me to be able to work with a guy who's had those kinds of people talk about him. I hesitate to say it, but he was a critic's darling, but for the right reasons.
I thought they were going to go on and, have hits on the radio every day. When I was 18 years old, I figured they were going to be the next big band. So when they split up at that point, I was pretty disappointed. When they got back together, it was exciting, to think that maybe it was going to happen. And the record deal with Red House seemed like a really good thing. And then they split up again. And I thought it was probably the end at that point, actually. So it's really cool to have them back together.
Complicated, working through. Complicated, ringing true.
Yeah, let's listen to it so we don't make fools of ourselves. it is a music city, you know. I mean, because it was kind of halfway between Memphis or New Orleans or Kansas City or St. Louis or Chicago, where a lot of people were making music. Nashville was a convenient location, stopover place, and so it kind of by default became, you know, an attractive music destination to make music. A lot of people come here expecting to become royalty, and then they end up becoming working class musicians.
It is still a business. It's not, you know, I work with enough musicians that when they're off the road, I use them in the studio. And Nashville, we couldn't be luckier to have a flood of talented musicians. These are guys that are going out on the road with huge country acts, making a living, but nobody's getting wealthy on that level. I know guys playing with people that they would think, he's been on Letterman 4 times, and he must be a millionaire. Well, that's not reality.
I challenge the premise that there is much of a middle class anymore. It's have and have-nots. It's the haves and have-nots.
The thing I find interesting is that this town is about the star. It's not about the people that make the star. And I guess that's just the nature of the beast.
And you have the Taylor Swifts of the world that the record companies can sell millions of records for. Then you have the people who are trying to sell 100, downloads at 99 cents each and call that a successful week, month, year. So the middle class of the music industry has gone, as well. There's no indie labels anymore. It's either the superstar artists that the labels are pushing, or sort of independent artists that are making their money by touring and selling downloads.
It's really hard, actually. I've been fortunate with the Jody Messina gig because I got that, and we work 40 to 50 days a year. She's had 9 number ones, sold a bunch of records, and we work every year, and she's really active at keeping her career going. So I've been fortunate. I have friends who I've grown up with and grew up with musically who are now working at Home Depot, and they were actually in cooler gigs when they started. They were the guys I was looking at being like, man, when I'm like you, I'm gonna buy a nice house. And now I'm like, or work at Home Depot, which is no say on them. They're great musicians. It's just, the touring is going away. Not as many bands tour as much.
Every year I have a new deal that comes up, and I start. Just as probably partly my personality, but as soon as I get renewed for a new deal, I see that clock start ticking. And it's like, okay, it's 11 months and 31 days, 11 months and 29 days. And, unless you have the luxury of getting a multiple year deal, guaranteed, it's 1 year at a time. And so I've been, for the last 16 years, living 1 year at a time.
You give them nothing but the best. They take your heart and leave the rest. You're only temporary while they're feeding. So teach your children very well. Never ask and never tell. At least they'll never waste their time believing it's over.
A song getting cut these days is like winning the lottery and getting struck by lightning on the same day. It really is. Because the odds are stacked against you.
We've lost 80 to 90% of all people that are not the artists that do this as a profession. Before piracy, before streaming, before the industry shrank like this, singles came out every 12 to 20 weeks. There was an album every year. And albums sold lots of copies. There were this many albums that were gold or platinum. Now there's this many.
When I first got into producing, a major label literally sent me a checkbook. A big book of checks and said, go make a record. But it's changed since then. Obviously, records don't sell like they used to, and I'm being master of the obvious here. It's a different industry than it was.
The music industry is an oxymoron these days. And there's the music and there's the industry.
It's a very ugly business, and yet we're stuck. We're kind of stuck in it. If you want to do it, you kind of have to play the game. It's music city, but it's music business city.
There's the business of it, but then there's the creative side. And the creative community in this town is loving and open and warm. The business side of it, not so much. But they have to interact. They depend on each other.
The things that you learn when you're killing yourself ain't like you see it in cartoons. It's more about dodging all the echoes you hear when you're wired to the moon. And you'll never be the same when the phonograph needle that you call your friend glides so casually into your vein. Whoa, little brother, it ain't gonna be easy.
Jim Riley's a success because he gets to do what he does every day. He gets to write every day.
My relationship with music and the music business and music itself, and basically I'm treating it like a lover, you know, and who I gave up a lot to be with. And again, it was my choice, so I'm not saying that I'm regretting anything. I'm really lucky to be able to do what I do and get up every morning and do what I love to do. But that is not without its consequences and its stresses and its insanities.
Is he, just barely above the poverty level? Yeah, probably so. But again, there are choices that we make, and the choice he has made is that he wants to live this creative existence and be able to write songs.
The most encouraging thing is that there's a lot of people here who aren't necessarily looking for that big, giant payday. They're just making music humbly, and enjoying that. And if they can eke out a living doing that, I think that there's a lot of people here who are comfortable with that.
I mean, he's universally loved in this town, and people love his music. I mean, any time that he decides he's going to play the Bluebird, it sells out in like 3 minutes. Hell, I can't even get a ticket to go see him. You heard that right, Riles? I can't even get a ticket to see him.
It's like the old joke, the guy's, shoveling shit at the circus, and he's throwing it in the wheelbarrow, and someone's like, why don't you get another job? And he said, what, and leave show business? It's one of those kind of things. It's like, what else are we going to do?
Reverb footsteps, I made beds. Say it's all inside my head, but now it's all over me. Playing it up, they'll play it down. Wait to carry it around, but now it's all over me. That's how we do it here on Heatherly.
I loved their music, and I love Jim Riley's writing, and to me, it's the natural extension of things if we're able to pick it up where we left off.
I admire them for the fact that they did and are doing what they want to do.
I mean, it's a New Dylan's record, which I think that, we've always done records that were just sort of a collection of songs. I think this one is a little more thematic. Just, want an opportunity to play with one of my favorite people and, my favorite musicians in the world. So, what's not to like?
It's something you do for yourself. Unlike the sort of country paradigm, the country songwriter paradigm, where it's like, or the country singer paradigm, where you do it for your fans. And that's great, but that's not what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it because it makes me happy. And I think that some of the better songwriters in the world are the ones that do it for themselves.
I'm thrilled for the guys, to be honest. The thing about music for me is the connection to the fans and the connection to people. And the New Dylans are a group of passionate men who love to play music and write and have something to say, and it's not just this kind of run-of-the-mill, let's write for a hit kind of deal. It's like, let's do something meaningful.
He just knows, he is a guy who truly loves music. He's a great wordsmith. He has great imagery in his songs, I think.
They're a thinking man's lyric. If you dig a little bit deeper, there's, it's kind of like, You know, on Music Row, they'll be looking for songs, and they'll go, send me some songs with substance. Well, he's got songs with substance, you know. It's just, you know, it's important music.
I think we've kind of moved towards the middle together, you know, in some ways, since we've been apart. But it's the respect. It's mutual respect, is what it is. And you know, I mean, we've not had any real struggles with this because we're both. It's one goal, you know, is to try and make a really good record that we can be proud of. That was the whole reason I wanted to do this in the first place, was because I didn't really. Although I love the songs on all those records, I wasn't really happy with the records. You know, this is by far and away the loudest, rawest, most emotional, most dynamic record we've ever made. No question. And it has a New Dylan's name on it because as much as I would complain or resist the idea, the notion, that's how I'm going to be remembered. That's how Reese is going to be remembered. As much as I've done here, even though I have had a lot more sort of quote-unquote success here, everyone still asks about the New Dylan's, and I would for years just say, well, we're not doing anything now. I'm doing this now. But after a while, it kind of hit me that maybe I should be thankful that someone knows me for anything at all.
I wouldn't mind making a few $100 to get some sort of return on the money my parents sunk into piano lessons. But other than that, you do it because you want to be creative. You want to write songs and record them, put them out, make yourself happy. If anybody else likes them, that's gravy.
The most important thing is to serve yourself and your muse. And I hate to sound so precious about it all, but I mean it really is about that. It really is about making yourself happy and creating something you're proud of. And hopefully you never create something that good so that you keep trying to create.